Hello everybody, this is a mod video again. We're going to talk about game code and we'll give you some tips. Again, we're going to focus on general stuff that can apply to several games, not just one. And we're going to start talking about why that noise is in the background. Anyway, if we want to control a script or a program, we'd usually use either a main game loop or a function or something like that, and it usually involves an if and then statement. Now, if and then, you go if my var equals 0, then run some code, end if. That's a common command found in lots and lots of different languages, and it's worth learning. You learn it in one, you've probably learned it in them all, right? If the if statement is, it can be adapted. You could do an if my var equals 0 and my other var equals 2, then run some code, end if. So there's two ways you can string together multiple questions. It's a very powerful command. It's an old school command, usually used in a main game loop. Usually these days it's replaced by functions and object-oriented code. And it's still used, don't get me wrong, it's still used, but you see it less often now. But it's a very good command for controlling game code and everything else, because it helps you ask a question. And what you have to do as a programmer is ask the game, or whatever you're doing, says why something's happened, if something's happened, or get it to check the state of things, and use an if statement to do it. The variables, they typically, if a gaming, I mean, all scripting languages of some kind use variables. It's algebra basically. You see, if you put 1 here and put 1 equals 2, you're just going to confuse yourself. But if you if you use a variable, it can be in a letter. A equals 1. So now the A represents 1. Now if you said 1 equals 2, they go, no, it doesn't. Now it equals 5. Now it's back to 1. So my 1 is equals 2, 5, and 1. You see, you can't do it, but you say A equals 2, 5, and 1 in different times during the program. It isn't so bad, because A can represent 1 now, and you wait 2 seconds. Now you can change it to 5 if you want. Wait 2 more seconds. Now we can change it to 6. Now, just to give you an example of how a variable A might work, A counts how many times I've been hit. 1, 2, 3. Each time I do that, that goes up by 1. 4. Let's reset A to 0. I haven't been hit at all now. Oh, I've been hit again. 1. Ouch. But anyway, you get the idea. It can change over the course of a program. A, or any variable you want it to be, you could call it after your mum if you want. You've got my mum there, right? That changes during the course of a game, and because it's a letter, you could have it A1. A1 can be a variable, you know. Sometimes a variable is declared with a $sign at the beginning, you know. So, but they're nearly always, you can nearly always see them as a letter equals a number or something else. They can also represent a word. A could equals English, B could equal French. So you can put anything in a variable, anything at all. It's a good way of storing data. In a way, you've got the basis of a database program right there, because they're basically stored in variables you might then drag back in to the world as needed, you know, through various commands. So you see the letter A can be anything. You could store anything in it. That's why we use it as control words. Now typically, well, not A, but any letter, any character, any combination of letters can characters usually, unless a particular language doesn't like certain combinations. But you have to find that out on a case-by-case basis. But anyway, variables in some cases are declared at the top. C++ defines its variables right at the very top. Define this, and you've got to tell it if it's a static var and a bunch of other vars. Other languages, you use different commands for defining the variable. Sometimes you just got to put v equals 0 to tell it what its initial value is, and that's it. But if you see a scripting language and it has a lot of variables at the top, right? Usually it's a variable equals whatever, right? Or define, and then the name of the variable which you see further down. I'll explain that. Take a script that you're editing, look down, what you don't know and quite understand, look down the list. When you see something that looks like a variable equals variable plus 1, that's a variable. You know that's a variable. Now go back up to the top of the page. if you see define, that same variable as, that's how they define as variables in that scripting language. Because you see it down the bottom, users variable, and you see your name again at the top as define something static, right, or whatever else, then this is how they're defining their variables, and you've got to learn that system too. So when you see AB mum equals my mum's name is, right, and then you see AB mum at the top in some fancy line of code, you've just defined out how that fancy line of code declares variables. You've learned how they declare variables right there and then. This is how you learn to read languages you've never used before, because there's similarities in all code, and you can use those codes to decipher the rest, and that's how you do it. So if you see a variable being used in the main script, and you see its name again at the top in a really weird command line you don't understand, right, I mean right at the top, then that is usually declaring the variable to be a variable. Right? It's saying to the system, this is a variable. I always consider such, you know, compiled languages usually, or interpreted languages to be, how can I put this, stupid motherfuckers. If a cat's the difference between a variable and whatever when it's written down in the code, then it's probably a very, very basic language, I think. In my experience, there's lots of languages I don't know, which might break that rule, but as a general rule, the smartest ones know what a variable is without needing it defined. Less smart ones require you to define it, but to be honest, the less smart ones tend to be the ones which have the greatest scope for, you know, for work. You could do a lot more with them. The ones where they know tend to be very narrow-minded, but they're much easier to work on and much smarter. So, get dumb code, you could do more with it. Smart code, you can do less with it because it's a bit stricter. So now we've got if then. Actually, there's another element to if. Your if and then. You've also got else if. Right, it's exactly the same. If my mum equals Janet, then, and then you put your code. Halfway down you put else if my mum equals Jane, your code, and then end if. Else if. See, if has got quite a lot of options in some languages and very few in others, and it's very powerful. So learn it. Right, trust me, learn it. The functions I mentioned in the previous video, where you've got function name, brackets. Just like variables, the function can be any name you like. You could say fluffy clouds, brackets, that's your name of a function. You could say 10101010, that's your name of your function, although it might complain if it's 101010. But anyway, if it's a name, I can add my name, you know, you know, please adapt, brackets. Typically though, use your function names to describe what the function is, right? So it helps you read the code later. Helps you understand what that function does if the function name is descriptive. So that's good practice. Anyhow, you have function name brackets. When you're using the function, you just type in the function name brackets in the main code. And at the end of the function, you have EndFunction usually. So you have function name brackets, EndFunction. That's an empty function. If you want to make a load of quests and stuff and you know you're going to need certain functions, you can create a bunch of placeholder functions straight away. You don't have to write the functions there and then. So this is what I do, by the way. This is how I get my questions so quickly. I do a main script, right, and I'll know roughly where I need to make a function call, and I will put function name brackets in the main code and it would go to a function. Now because I'm working on this script, if I suddenly started working on that script, the function, I'd be distracted and then I'd make mistakes. So I put function in here, and I might comment it out sometimes, right, so it doesn't run, but it'll be there waiting for me to work on. And then over here, I have function name brackets, EndFunction, nothing in it. It'd be completely empty. The only thing that'll tell me what it's for is the name, right? And the name would appear here. And I'd know this bit of the code needs a bit of work. Then I carry on finishing this off. Now, functions are also something well worth learning early on, especially if you're modding something that's got object-oriented code. Examples would be Skyrim, Fallout 4, and a bunch of others. Main game loops examples would be, you know, with if then else statements, would be Oblivion, probably Morrowind. and a dozen games before it all use that kind of thing. In fact, I think MechWarrior does as well. Freelancer, I think Dawn of War does. So these are all games that use the if statement that I vaguely remember. So there's two methods of bringing things in and controlling stuff. The variables will work outside of an if statement. They don't need to be in an if statement. You could put variables equal 1 anywhere in your code, and every time the code passes it, it would set it to 1. If you put a variable equals variable plus 1, it would go up by 1 every time. If you put an if statement that said if v equals 5, then v equals 1, then every time v equals 5, it gets reset to 1. And that's it. I'm going to repeat that because that's a good trick. Imagine that we've got a counter, right? We want it to count to 10, then reset to 1. Right? We could use an if statement to do that. We go if v, or say C, because C stands for counter, doesn't it? We all use C for counter because we like to read our variables and know what they mean because we're not idiots. So we put if C equals 10, then on the next line you put C equals 0, Endif. Now, your counter goes round at the top. You've got C equals C plus 1. C starts out as 0, so the first pass is on 0, right? So if you put it on 10, it's actually counting 11 times. 0, 1, 2, 3. You can see it's 10. You've got to be aware of that because computers start counting at 0. So really we should have put if C equals 9, you know, but we're going to stick to 10 for simplistic sake. You know, if we put C equals C plus 1 at the bottom of the code, actually better, you know, when it's finished doing the pass, not at the top, right? It says it will go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 10. Then it resets it to 0, right? And it'll go back to 1 again. That gives you a controlled count of how many times the loop goes around. You could use these counters to execute code. Let's just give an example. Right? We'll start talking about practical examples here of where you could use this. But remember, in code, you have to be aware of every potential ending. You can't have any unexpected endings, right? Every door that you don't want to use has to be locked tight so the user can't go through it, right? If you, for instance, if you're doing like hit locations and you forget the arms, and then the player hits somebody in the arm and kills somebody, your program's going to break because you haven't allowed for the arm. So you have to allow for everything. You have to encompass everything. You have to be, what if the player did this, and then write code to cover it, right? This is the difference between a good program and a bad one. The good one will you know, cross all the T's and dot all the I's, and this is what you've got to learn to do. Now I've forgotten what I was going to do now. Yeah, I've completely lost it now. Anyway, practical examples. Right, so here's one, a real one. I'd use this to make an AI because I also write AIs. If you wanted a bot, because in MechWarrior 4 they have a command that allows you to count how many hits you've got and who shot you. Now you also have a timer, and you put if hit. This isn't actually a real program. This isn't. I'm saying this in English so you can understand what's going on. And I tend to read programs like this. I interpret whatever I see on the screen into these words so I understand it as well. So go if hit, count hits, who hit me, timer start. Right. So the hits go to 1. Right. Bob hit me. Timer's counting up. Right. If the timer equals is less than 60, who hit me, right? Or have I been hit? Who hit me? Blah blah blah. We added up how many hits we're getting, right? It says and who's doing it. And if it turns out Bob shot us 6 times in less than a minute, it means Bob's trying to kill us. So we turn around and we get the bot to kill Bob. Right, so we stick all of that code inside an if statement or a function or anywhere we want, and we have the thing just monitor. Now, it is a closing tip for you. Now, these control methods are very, very important. It's worth learning really early on, right? Because these are something you can insert into any program yourself when you're testing things. Now, if you're going to actually, I forgot what we're doing again now. If you're going to actually, use these kind of things, you will be using it in conjunction with a game's own commands, because they're usually what give you the power to do and manipulate the world around you, right? And if you're going to make an AI, and this is the important bit, right? Its brain cells, right, are basically what it remembers from the game. Now, like all things, it'll know how to breathe, but it won't know how to walk, and it might struggle to eat at first, like a baby, because babies are blank sheets, and bots, babies, robots, human beings, we learn in very similar ways, right? We're taught. Now, sometimes if you don't have game code that learns from its mistakes, then you've got a dumb AI. If you've got an AI that does learn from its mistakes, and you've got enough memory on your system to store the data learned from these mistakes, then you could have a very smart AI, We're talking like Terminator type stuff here, so you really need to limit what you mean. Let's face it, if you've got a bot, an AI bot, it only has to know who's shooting at it, whether it's wounded or not, whether it should escape or change tactics. That's all it needs to know. It doesn't need to know what was on telly last night. So you can limit what it learns and bring it down into a very narrow field, right? You don't need to teach it the football scores or anything like that. You can just focus on the job at hand. So you can make even a bot AI look really, really smart, really, really easily, simply by focusing on the job it needs and the information it needs to work. Now, when I did AIs for games like Supreme Commander, Dark Reign and things like that, I did that. And I did the same thing with MechWarrior 4. And if you're going to store code, you're going to need variables of some kind, because you can effectively make your own database of findings. And usually a bot, like your 3 bots, bot A, bot B, bot C, each one of those, if you've got A equals on that one, and A equals on this one, and A equals that one, then they're instances usually. A on bot 1 is 2, A on bot 3 can be anything else, well, A and bot, all the other bots can be anything else. So they're not the same, usually, because most people's game code are intelligent enough to make a differentiate between bot 1, bot 2 and bot 3 and the script that they're running on it. So if you change A to 1 there, it won't be 1 there or 1 there. These will have to add up themselves. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes if you change it to 1, all the other bots update as well, which just leads to some hilarious results, because it's extremely bad practice, I would say, unless there's a specific reason for it. But if you're actually going to do game code and stuff like that, right, you can force your bots to learn, or your AI to learn this same way using variables. You can, if the game supports hits like MechWarrior 4 does, you can count how many hits that bot's taken. And information is everything. Gather that information, store that information for later use. Don't forget though, right, to reset the information occasionally, because it just keeps eating up memory, right? And you really need to cap it. For instance, at some point, if you're going to count how many hits, when you get to 100, stop. It means he's probably dead, right? So you don't let it go up infinitely. Cap it, end it, close that door at a certain amount and reset it to 0 again. Right, and that way it doesn't get using more and more space in memory until the whole system crashes, because that would be effectively a memory leak. Because memory leaks tend to be like that. It's variables that go up and 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 never get reset. So always end it, cap it. Don't let it go beyond a certain amount. Usually it's 9, 9, 9, 9, 9. They put a lot of nines in and that's it. But anyway, if you have a bot that remembers how many hits and who's shooting at it, you can use that data to make that bot do things. And this is the key to features in your mods, right? You collect the data, like in the case of Supreme Commander, my HAL AI, named after 2001 by the way, would fly around. It'd make scouts first and have them patrol the map. And these would discover if there was any islands, any boats, anything else like that. And he'd find out if it was actually on a land map or a water map. and then it would change tactics accordingly because it didn't know initially where it was. Right, so he couldn't cheat. He couldn't say, well, I know the player is right there because I'm magic. It had to find the player first. If you were to play an AI that when the player's there, that's its start position, I'll just attack that spot. If you want to beat the AI, all you've got to do is move down the corner of the map, and the AI wouldn't be able to find you. That's how crap some full commercial AIs in games have been in the past. And that's how easily they were to fool. Just move straight down to a different start point, and they're like, where's he gone? What do? We don't know because we're stupid. So don't fall for that. Have your AI learn the hard way. Do it the way, you know, a human being would do it. Send out scouts. Break the process down into a series of logical steps. Stick them inside functions and if statements and all those kind of things using whatever commands are available to you. In the end, what you're doing is you're replicating the learning process of a baby, only this is for a computer. So yeah, anyway, I think 20 minutes is long enough for this. To be honest, if you start with if statements and functions like I said here, you'd be in a good starting spot, you know, because all the other commands fit inside these things somewhere, and they are major control systems for everything. Functions are especially good. Object-oriented code is especially good because it allows you to it allows you to focus on one tiny little bit of code. Instead of saying, whoa, what's all of this? I'm lost. You just focus on that bit, focus on that bit. Oh, I need some more code. I'll make another little bit here. It's really easy, really, really easy. It just seems hard when you're not used to it and you're not familiar with functions. But yeah, just scripting is not something you see a lot of people doing. Right, but it isn't that hard. Right, it's something you have got to read. You can't get away with not reading up on things. You've got to study. You're gonna have some help page up here or whatever guide up there whilst you're programming here all the time. Even when you're an expert, you're gonna have that up. A lot of as you get to a certain point, a lot of the tutorials you see you're gonna find out they're completely wrong. You'll start out by learning from those tutorials, but you'll reach a point eventually where you'll pass those tutorials and you will realise that those tutorials are wrong. And you'll get to the point where you want to rewrite them, and you'll rewrite yours thinking this is a work of art and nobody will be able to understand it. And the reason for that is you're now past the point where a newbie would be able to realistically follow what you're saying. These other tutorials might be crap, but at the newbie level they're understandable. Once you get to your level, you know, a high level where you actually understand all the ramifications of everything and how everything works, you would have wrote those tutorials very differently and probably nobody would understand the word you were saying. This is why when you get developers writing guides for games, most people are clueless what they've just said. They might as well have been speaking French because they've forgotten what it's like to be a newbie. And that's the real skill in guide writing, is remembering what it's like to be a newbie, not forgetting, and knowing how to talk down to that level instead of trying to impress them with your expert knowledge up here. Because if you're going to speak a language nobody understands, you're impressing nobody. Right then, see you in the next one, and there'll be more of these coming up because I quite like doing them, and whilst they're not tutorials, they are the kind of videos that would get your mind in the right place. See you later.